Today I married a 22-year-old Emily, my upgrade from my ex-wife Renee here. She was just too dull for me. Greg's voice boomed across the crowded restaurant as he gestured towards me with a smirk. But hey, everyone makes mistakes, right? I froze, the wine glass slipping from my trembling hand as the blood drained from my face. The stunned silence of our table was deafening, broken only by the clattering of silverware and hushed murmurs from nearby diners. Greg's words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating me with their audacity. My mind raced back to the beginning, when I had first met Greg at a tech conference. His charm and confidence had been intoxicating, and I fell hard for his smooth talking and promises of a future together. Our courtship was a whirlwind, and before I knew it, we were exchanging vows bound by the sacred ties of marriage. But those ties quickly frayed as Greg's true colors emerged. The man I had fallen for was slowly replaced by a cold, dismissive stranger who seemed to take pleasure in belittling me. I found myself constantly questioning my own worth, walking on eggshells to avoid his scathing remarks. As time passed, the emotional distance between us grew, and I began to suspect that Greg's late nights at the office were more than just long work hours. The lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the furtive glances at his phone, all signs that I couldn't ignore any longer. With a heavy heart, I started documenting his behavior, carefully collecting evidence of his infidelity. Every missed call, every suspicious text message was meticulously recorded, building a case that would eventually shatter the illusion of our marriage. Greg's words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of the depth of his betrayal. But somewhere beneath the anguish, a spark of determination ignited within me. I would not be the victim in this story. It was time to take control and expose the truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days that followed Greg's humiliating outburst, I found myself retreating into a numb haze, grappling with the harsh reality of his infidelity. Everywhere I turned, reminders of his betrayal taunted me, from the lingering scent of his cologne on our bedsheets to the sickening messages I discovered on his phone. Sarah, my ever-loyal best friend, was a constant source of support during those dark times. "He's a lying snake, Renee," she spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "You deserve so much better than that sorry excuse for a man." Her words resonated deeply, fueling the fire within me. I couldn't let Greg simply discard me like yesterday's trash, not after everything we'd been through. With Sarah's encouragement, I started meticulously compiling evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that could expose his duplicitous ways. Finally, one fateful evening, I decided to confront him head-on. Greg had just returned from one of his late nights at the office, his shirt crumpled and his hair disheveled. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. He barely acknowledged me, dismissively waving a hand as he headed for the fridge. "Can it wait, Renee? I'm starving." "No, it can't wait." I slammed the folder of evidence onto the counter, startling him. "Look at these, Greg. Look at what I've found." His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. "So you've been spying on me? Real classy, Renee." "Don't try to turn this around on me," I snapped. "You're the one who's been lying and cheating. With Emily, no less." A sly grin crept across his face. "Ah, yes, Emily. Now there's a real woman, not some uptight nag like you." The venom in his words stung, but I refused to back down. "How could you do this to us, Greg? To our marriage?" He let out a derisive laugh. "Our marriage? Please, Renee. That ship sailed a long time ago. I want a divorce, and you're not going to stop me from being happy with Emily." In that moment, the final shreds of my love for Greg withered away, replaced by a burning desire for retribution. He thought he could simply cast me aside and ride off into the sunset with his young mistress? Not on my watch. As Greg stormed out of the room, I clutched the folder close, a determined glint in my eye. This was war, and I intended to emerge victorious no matter what it took. With Greg's bitter words still ringing in my ears, I knew I needed to take action. Sitting idly by while he trampled over our marriage vows was not an option. It was time to fight back, and for that, I needed an ally in my corner. Lisa Turner came highly recommended by a friend, a no-nonsense divorce attorney known for her tenacity. Our first meeting left me feeling empowered as she laid out the legal avenues I could pursue. Greg's infidelity gives you grounds for a fault divorce, Lisa explained, her steely gaze fixed on me. And with the evidence you've gathered, we have a strong case for securing a sizable settlement. A weight lifted from my shoulders. Finally, I had a path forward, a way to make Greg pay for his misdeeds. Lisa wasted no time in filing the necessary paperwork, setting the wheels in motion. In the meantime, I continued documenting Greg's exploits, paying close attention to his finances. It didn't take long to uncover a trail of overspending and questionable purchases, expensive jewelry, lavish dinners, all likely ploys to woo his young mistress. One fateful afternoon, as I was restocking our fridge at the local grocery store, a familiar figure caught my eye. There she was, Emily, draped in an ostentatious fur coat that likely cost more than my car. Her saccharine smile turned sickly sweet as she sauntered over. "Well, if it isn't the scorned wife," she cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Greg told me all about how you've been making his life miserable." My hands clenched into fists as I fought the urge to lash out. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Emily. Greg's just using you." She let out a derisive laugh. "Keep telling yourself that, dear. Greg loves me in a way he could never love a frigid shrew like you." Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving a trail of her sickly sweet perfume in her wake. My blood boiled with rage, fueling my determination to take Greg down once and for all. With Lisa's guidance, we crafted a meticulous plan to expose Greg's deceit and ensure I received every penny I was owed. Financial records, witness statements, even private investigators, no stone would be left unturned in our pursuit of justice. As the court date loomed closer, I found myself filled with a sense of purpose. Greg had made the grave mistake of underestimating me, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden wife he had taken for granted. I was a woman on a mission, and nothing would stand in my way. With Lisa's guidance, I knew it was time to turn up the heat on Greg. No more playing nice. He needed to feel the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. The first salvo came in the form of a certified letter delivered straight to Greg's office. I couldn't help but smirk at the thought of his colleagues whispering behind his back, speculating about the impending legal drama. True to form, Greg responded with fury when he called me later that evening. "What the hell is this, Renee?" he snarled into the phone. "You have no right to do this." "I have every right," I shot back, my voice steady and unwavering. "You brought this on yourself, Greg. Did you really think you could just discard me like trash and ride off into the sunset with your little mistress?" His silence spoke volumes. For once, the smug, arrogant Greg seemed at a loss for words. From that point on, it was a whirlwind of activity. Lisa and I burned the midnight oil, poring over financial records and gathering every shred of evidence we could find. Witness statements, private investigator reports, even footage from security cameras, nothing was off limits. With each new piece of damning information, I felt a surge of vindication coursing through my veins. Greg had truly underestimated me, and now he would pay the ultimate price. Lisa proved to be a formidable ally, her legal expertise guiding me through the often confusing maze of divorce proceedings. "There are different types of compensation we can pursue," she explained one evening as we strategized over takeout containers. "Alimony, of course, to ensure you maintain your standard of living. But we can also go after a lump sum payment, as well as a portion of Greg's assets and investments." My head spun at the prospect, but Lisa's confidence was contagious. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to envision a future without Greg's shadow looming over me. As the court date drew nearer, the tension was palpable. Greg's lawyers tried every trick in the book, from character assassinations to spurious counter-accusations. But Lisa was a rock, her unwavering resolve a beacon guiding me through the storm. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. I took the stand, my heart pounding in my chest as I recounted the sordid details of Greg's betrayal. His lawyers tried to rattle me, but I stood firm, bolstered by the mountain of evidence we had amassed. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, the weight that had been bearing down on me for months seemed to lift. Greg was ordered to pay a substantial settlement, including alimony and a sizable portion of his assets. As the courtroom cleared, I caught a glimpse of Greg's contorted face, twisted with rage and disbelief. But for once, his tantrum didn't faze me. I had won, and nothing could take that away from me. The weight of the past year seemed to lift from my shoulders as I stepped out of the courthouse, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was free. Free from Greg's grip, free from the turmoil that had consumed my life. As I finalized the divorce paperwork and transferred the settlement funds into my own account, a sense of vindication washed over me. Greg had tried his damnedest to break me, but in the end, I had emerged victorious, with my dignity and self-worth intact. Of course, Greg couldn't let me savor the victory without one last temper tantrum. As I was packing up the last remnants of my life from our once-shared home, he barged in, his face contorted with rage. "You think you've won, don't you?" he spat, looming over me with clenched fists. "Well, this isn't over, Renee. You haven't heard the last of me." I met his gaze with a calm, steady stare. "It's over, Greg. I've moved on, and so should you." Without another word, I brushed past him, leaving him to stew in his own bitterness. In the weeks that followed, I found solace in the simple pleasures I had long neglected. Leisurely walks in the park, catching up on my reading, and reconnecting with old friends. It was as if a weight had been lifted, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in years. Sarah, ever the supportive friend, insisted on treating me to a much-needed getaway. "You've been through hell and back," she said, wrapping me in a warm embrace. "It's time to treat yourself." And so, with my settlement funds safely tucked away, I booked a solo trip to the coast. A chance to reset and rediscover the woman I had been before Greg's toxicity seeped into my life. The salty sea air and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore worked their magic, slowly but surely washing away the lingering ache of my shattered marriage. As I strolled along the sand, the sun's warmth caressing my skin, I marveled at the newfound freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. No longer was I beholden to Greg's whims and moods, walking on eggshells to avoid his wrath. I was my own woman, master of my own destiny, with a world of possibilities stretching out before me. In those quiet moments of solitude, I found myself reflecting on the path that had led me here, the heartache, the betrayal, the grueling battle for justice. And yet, through it all, I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more fiercely protective of my own worth. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I made a silent vow to myself. Never again would I allow someone else to diminish my light. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to do so on my own terms, without apology or regret. The months following my divorce from Greg ushered in a newfound sense of peace and self-discovery. I threw myself into my work, relishing the freedom to chase my ambitions without the weight of a toxic relationship holding me back. It was at a local charity gala, surrounded by the city's elite, that my hard-earned tranquility was shattered. As I mingled with colleagues and potential investors, a familiar figure caught my eye across the crowded ballroom. Greg, looking every bit the smug philanderer, with Emily draped on his arm like a gaudy accessory. I felt my stomach lurch as they approached, Greg's self-satisfied smirk seeming to grow wider with every step. "Well, well, if it isn't my dear ex-wife," he proclaimed loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Renee, meet my radiant wife, Emily. We're expecting our little bundle of joy soon. Looks like everything is going right for me." Emily flashed a sickly sweet smile, her hand resting on the swell of her pregnant belly. In that moment, a wave of nausea washed over me, threatening to send the contents of my glass tumbling to the floor. Before I could react, the words spilled from my lips, fueled by a sudden surge of righteous indignation. "Congratulations," I replied, my voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain. "How many men have fathered your supposed bundle of joys, Emily?" The smile melted from Emily's face as she recoiled, her eyes widening in shock. Greg, ever the clueless fool, simply furrowed his brow in confusion. "What the hell are you talking about, Renee?" I leveled my gaze at Emily, unflinching. "You heard me. Or did you think your little secrets would stay buried forever?" With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving Greg sputtering in my wake. The weight of Emily's deceit, the tangled web of lies she had spun, no longer burdened me. In that moment, I felt a sense of liberation, a vindication that transcended the petty drama of my failed marriage. In the days that followed, whispers rippled through the social grapevine, rumors of Emily's sordid past, a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives left in her wake. It seemed that even Greg's wealth and status couldn't shield him from the consequences of his misplaced trust. One evening, as I was unwinding after a long day at the office, my phone rang with an all-too-familiar number. Greg's voice, laced with desperation, crackled through the line. "Renee, we need to talk. Please, just hear me out." I almost pitied him in that moment, a man brought to his knees by his own hubris. But the scars of his betrayal ran too deep, and I had no intention of reopening those wounds. "Greg, it's over," I replied, my voice steady and resolute. "Whatever mess you've found yourself in, you'll have to sort it out on your own." His pleas fell on deaf ears as I ended the call, a newfound sense of closure washing over me. The path ahead was clear, unburdened by the baggage of my failed marriage. In the days and weeks that followed, I watched from afar as Greg's world unraveled. Emily's web of lies lay exposed, and the once charming businessman found himself shunned by the very social circles he had once dominated. As for me, I strode forward with my head held high, reveling in the knowledge that I had emerged from the ashes of my former life stronger, wiser, and utterly vindicated. As I left the charity gala that fateful night, a peculiar sense of satisfaction washed over me. For too long, I had allowed Greg and his scheming mistress to dictate the narrative, to hold the power over my emotions. But in that moment, the tables had turned, and their carefully constructed facade was crumbling before their very eyes. In the days that followed, the whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the social circles Greg and Emily had once dominated. It seemed that Emily's past indiscretions, her trail of broken hearts and shattered lives, had finally caught up with her. Reports trickled in of scorned lovers emerging from the shadows, each with their own sordid tale of Emily's deceit. Fake identities, fabricated pregnancies, entire relationships built on a foundation of lies. It was a twisted web that even Greg, in all his arrogance, couldn't ignore. The once charming businessman found himself increasingly isolated, his friends and colleagues distancing themselves from the unfolding drama. Gone were the days of backslapping camaraderie and exclusive country club memberships. In their place, a deafening silence, punctuated by sidelong glances and hushed whispers. It was during this period of social exile that Greg reached out to me, his voice tinged with desperation. "Renee, please," he implored over the crackling phone line. "You have to help me. Emily, she's not who I thought she was." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at the irony of his plea. "And you think I owe you anything, Greg, after everything you put me through?" His silence spoke volumes. For once, the smooth-talking charmer was at a loss for words, his silver tongue rendered impotent by the weight of his own hubris. "I'm sorry, Greg," I continued, my voice brimming with a newfound confidence, "but you made your bed a long time ago. Now you get to lie in it." With a decisive click, I ended the call, severing the last remaining tie to my former life. Greg's world was crumbling around him, and I had no intention of getting caught in the rubble. As the weeks wore on, the once powerful couple found themselves increasingly ostracized, their social status reduced to little more than a punchline. Emily's web of lies lay exposed, her carefully curated persona unraveling thread by thread. And Greg, the man who had once so callously discarded me in pursuit of his own selfish desires, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The lavish lifestyle, the adoring social circle, the illusion of power and prestige, all of it had crumbled in the wake of Emily's deception. For my part, I watched the drama unfold from a safe distance, a silent observer to the karmic retribution that had befallen my former tormentors. There was a certain poetic justice in their downfall, a vindication that transcended mere words or actions. As I moved forward with my life, building a thriving career and nurturing healthy relationships, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the trials I had endured. They had forged me into a stronger, more resilient woman, one who would never again allow herself to be diminished by the likes of Greg or Emily. In the end, their twisted games had only served to illuminate my own inner strength, a resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times and into the light of a new, fulfilling chapter. And for that, I would be eternally grateful. 2 years had passed since that fateful encounter with Greg and Emily at the charity gala, 2 years of healing, growth, and hard-earned triumph. As I stood in the sleek, modern office that had become the headquarters of my burgeoning tech startup, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. What had once been a mere glimmer of an idea, a passion project born out of the ashes of my failed marriage, had now blossomed into a thriving business empire. My innovative software solutions were in high demand, attracting clients from all corners of the globe and securing my financial independence for years to come. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells, of letting Greg's toxic presence dictate my every move. I was the master of my own destiny now, calling the shots and shaping my future with an unwavering determination. As I navigated the bustling office, exchanging friendly banter with my dedicated team of employees, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was my legacy, built from the ground up through sheer grit and resilience. Of course, the road to success hadn't been an easy one. There had been countless late nights, nerve-wracking pitches to skeptical investors, and more than a few setbacks along the way. But each obstacle had only served to fuel my determination, reminding me of the depths I had been forced to climb from. In stark contrast to my own ascent, Greg's fortunes had taken a decidedly different turn. Word had trickled down through the grapevine that he was now persona non grata in the business world, his once sterling reputation tarnished beyond repair by the fallout from Emily's deception. Jobless and shunned by his former social circles, Greg had become little more than a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils of unchecked arrogance and poor judgment. Part of me almost pitied the man, reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. Almost. The truth was, I had long since moved past any lingering bitterness or resentment towards my ex-husband. His actions, while reprehensible, had ultimately served as the catalyst for my own personal revolution, forcing me to shed the shackles of my former meek existence and embrace the strong, self-assured woman I had become. As I stepped out onto the balcony of my corner office, taking in the breathtaking view of the city skyline, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude for the winding path that had led me here. The heartache, the betrayal, the grueling battles, they had all been necessary steps on my journey towards true fulfillment. A gentle knock at the door broke me from my reverie, and I turned to find Nathan, my new romantic partner, standing in the doorway with a warm smile. Nathan, with his kind eyes and unwavering support, had been a beacon of light during those darkest days, a reminder that not all men were cut from the same cloth as Greg. "Ready for our dinner reservation?" he asked, his voice laced with affection. I nodded, slipping my hand into his as we made our way out of the office. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly, blissfully content. Not just with my professional achievements, but with the person I had become. As we strolled through the city streets, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of urban life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism for the future. The shadows of my past had been banished, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the present and all the wonders it had to offer. Greg and Emily were mere footnotes in my story now, relics of a chapter best left behind. The path ahead was mine to forge, unencumbered by the weight of past mistakes or regrets. And with each step forward, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient, and more confident in my ability to conquer whatever obstacles life might throw my way.
My husband, who was working away from home, came back with a woman and dropped a bombshell on me.
"This is my girlfriend. I met her while I was away. She's really great."
Are you saying you've been cheating?
"Yeah, I have. Anyway, that's how it is, so I want a divorce."
I was stunned by his sudden demand for a divorce. Are you serious?
"Yes, I'm serious. You're not charming, you're infertile, and there was nothing good about being with you. Just sign the divorce papers already."
At that moment, I felt something inside me break. I can't be married to this person anymore. If that's how he feels, then I'll give him his divorce. And so I signed the divorce papers in front of my smirking husband and his mistress. 3 years later, my ex-husband Elliot would come to learn a certain truth. My name is Angela, 34 years old. I'm a working mom raising my 1-year-old daughter. My husband's name is John. He's a busy company executive, but he's always caring for me and our daughter. But the thing is, John is my second husband. First, I want to talk about my hellish first marriage with Elliot. After graduating from college, I joined a company in a general position and worked hard. When I was 26, a friend introduced me to a man. That man was Elliot, who would become my ex-husband. He was a salaried worker at a small to medium-sized company. During our relationship, I found his somewhat forceful nature to be manly.
I love kids, so I want to have them right away when I get married.
He used to say that during our courtship. I took it as a sign that he was serious about our future together, which made me happy. After 2 years of dating, we got married and started living together. At that time, my income was slightly higher than his. Maybe that hurt his pride, because he began to act arrogantly towards me right after we got married. He expected me to do all the household chores. He bossed me around in a commanding tone and never said thank you. I felt like I was living like a servant. Besides his attitude, we had another problem. We couldn't have children, even after nearly 2 years of marriage. My mother-in-law, Susan, who had been kind before, started making snide remarks. Why can't you get pregnant even after all this time? I'm sorry. My friend just had her second grandchild. I want to hold my grandchild in my arms soon. I was under pressure from her and struggling with fertility issues, but we still couldn't conceive. When Elliot found out I wasn't pregnant again that month, he lashed out at me in frustration.
I love kids and I want them soon. You remember me saying that, right? So why can't we have them?
It's not something we can make it happen as planned, you know. Why don't we go to the hospital together next time?
That's unnecessary. The problem is obviously with you.
Me?
Yes, you. Pay more attention to your diet. It's your fault we can't have kids.
Saying that, he sulked and went to bed alone. I was anxious because we couldn't conceive. Elliot was uncooperative with fertility treatments, so I had to do everything I could on my own. During this time, he got transferred to a branch office far away for about 2 years.
What do you want to do? Do you want to come with me?
But I have my job too.
Okay, I'll go alone then. You don't need to come with me.
And just like that, he left for his assignment, and I felt a sense of relief. Maybe our marriage needed this time apart. That's what I thought. Even though he often called and came home once a month, living alone was honestly more relaxing as I only had to take care of myself. About 6 months after he left, I noticed a decrease in his communication. He often wouldn't answer my calls and ignore my messages. The frequency of his visits home also decreased, and I started feeling uneasy. My suspicions were confirmed soon after. On the day he returned after a long absence, the intercom of the auto lock entrance suddenly rang. Looking at the screen, I saw a young woman standing behind him. Feeling uneasy, I prepared to record the room before letting them in. Welcome home. And this is? Next to a smug Elliot, a petite woman was grinning. Hi, I'm Gina. Nice to meet you, Angela. I'm asking Elliot, not you. Who exactly is this woman?
She's my girlfriend from where I'm working.
Excuse me? Elliot, with his arm around Gina, declared.
She takes great care of me while I'm away from home. She's really a great girl.
Do you even understand what you're saying?
Of course. Anyway, that's how it is. So I want a divorce.
Faced with his sudden demand for a divorce, I was frozen. Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious. You're not charming. You're infertile, and there was nothing good about being with you. Just sign the divorce papers already.
At that moment, I felt something inside me break. I can't be married to this person anymore. If that's how he feels, then I'll give him his divorce. And so I signed the divorce papers in front of my smirking husband and his mistress. Getting a divorce involves a lot of detailed procedures and explanations to those around you. I was so exhausted that I didn't ask for any alimony from them. In fact, I was even relieved to part ways smoothly. Sometime later, I received a call from an unknown number.
Hello, my name is John. I was engaged to the woman who was involved with your husband.
I was shocked. I had no idea Gina was engaged. He explained that he found out about Gina's affair and wanted to claim compensation, but lacked evidence, so he tracked me down and contacted me. He asked if I knew anything or had any concrete proof. I remembered I had recorded their visit to our house and agreed to meet with him to share it. John turned out to be a decent young man.
I've been busy starting my own company. Because of that, I neglected her, and she ended up getting involved with your husband. I'm sorry for the trouble.
No, you don't need to apologize for that. We both had bad luck. So I handed over the video evidence to him, and we parted ways that day. He and I continued to stay in touch. According to him, Gina was in a panic, not expecting the engagement to be called off. She showed up at my place wanting to witness the drama. She never intended to marry Elliot. It was just a fling.
I'm glad I didn't end up marrying such a twisted person,
he said with a wry smile. Later on, I learned that Gina reluctantly married Elliot after paying the compensation. Whether he knew she only considered him a fling was unclear. Knowing that they were living together didn't affect me at all. I couldn't care less what they were up to. What surprised me was when John asked me out.
Talking to you, I realized how sincere and strong you are. It's a strange way to meet, but I'm attracted to you as a person.
He said this seriously, and I nodded. I had started to become interested in the capable and kind John myself, so we started dating with marriage in mind. Things progressed quickly, and a year after my divorce from Elliot, I remarried. Life is full of surprises. My marriage with John was very happy. He was busy running his company, but always helped with the housework and cared for me. And to our great joy, I became pregnant soon after we got married. He was over the moon about this. We eagerly awaited the birth of our child. This is how our daughter Pearl was born. He doted on her, becoming a wonderful hands-on dad. He would change her diaper and soothe her without me having to say anything. I adored Pearl, and we lived happily. Before I knew it, nearly 3 years had passed since I split from Elliot. Pearl was now a year old and learning to walk. She was at her cutest. One day I took her to a shopping mall a little way from home. That's when someone called out to me from behind.
Hey, look who it is.
What? I turned around to see Elliot, whom I hadn't seen in about 3 years. His hair had thinned, and he was dressed shabbily.
I knew it was you. Long time no see, Angela.
He approached with a happy look on his face. I stepped back. What are you doing here?
Well, a lot happened after that, and I moved back home.
I see. Well, I have to go now. I pushed Pearl's stroller, intending to leave.
Wait, that kid.
His eyes sparkled as he looked at my daughter. I quickly stood in front of her to shield her.
Let me see her more. She's adorable. Why didn't you tell me you had a kid?
And why exactly would I do that?
She's mine, right? She's so cute. Listen, let's get remarried. She needs a father.
Excuse me? I almost laughed. Remarry? Didn't you marry Gina?
Oh, I divorced her. She was a terrible woman.
He began to pour out his story. Gina got pregnant soon after their marriage. But when a baby boy was born, his blood type revealed Elliot wasn't the father.
DNA tests showed he wasn't mine. Can you believe it? She was such a wicked woman. I was totally deceived.
Gina, who flirted with a married man, despite being engaged. Her true nature should have been obvious from the start. I was appalled, once again, by her awfulness. But I had no sympathy for him.
So, that's why I'm lonely now. I should be building a happy family with children at my age, but here I am, still single. But meeting you and our kid like this? Wow, I never knew I had a kid. I thought you were infertile, but it must have been my good DNA. This is the happiest thing. So, where do you live now? Maybe I should move there too.
I stayed silent, and he continued.
What, still mad about back then? But it can't be helped. You were infertile, and Gina was young and cute. Maybe it's fate that we're meant to be together.
He grinned as he rambled on. Just then, someone else approached us.
What's going on, babe?
My husband John, who had been shopping nearby, came over. Elliot's eyes widened when he saw him.
You are...
He looked confusedly between me and John.
Hey, what's going on here? Angela, why are you with Gina's ex-fiancé?
So, I explained it to him. I think you've met before, but let me introduce him to you. This is my husband John.
What?
He was shocked, his mouth agape, and John sarcastically greeted him.
Long time no see.
They had met once before.
Angela, you got remarried?
Yes, so of course this child is his. Don't they look alike? He looked back and forth between John and Pearl, growing paler by the second.
Is that true? Why? How could you be with this man?
I met him after our divorce. He was gathering evidence to break off his engagement with Gina. That's how we met.
She's right. The only thing I have to thank you for is being the reason I met her.
Elliot gritted his teeth at John's words. I pressed on. By the way, at the time, Gina really didn't want to break up with John. She made quite a fuss.
She did?
She actually wanted to marry John. She said you were just a fling.
No, she loved me.
Apparently, he didn't know that she was only playing with him. He started holding his head in distress. If I still loved you, I wouldn't have had John's child, would I?
Thanks for taking that bad deal off my hands.
Elliot trembled as we took turns speaking. I decided to drop another bombshell. But honestly, it was impossible for Gina to have your child in the first place.
What do you mean?
Because you can't father children. Indeed, just before he went on his assignment, I had secretly submitted a sample of his to a hospital for testing. It revealed that natural conception was nearly impossible for him. He turned red at my words.
That can't be. The infertility issue was all your fault. There's no way I can't have children.
Oh, really? I got pregnant with John's child easily, you know? If you don't believe me, go to the hospital yourself. Elliot looked up at the sky, his face changing color. John then spoke up.
This meeting was a coincidence, but please, refrain from bothering my wife and daughter from now on. What? Why should I listen to you? Because I'm their husband and father. I'll take legal action if necessary. Shut up! What can a guy running a nearly bankrupt company do legally?
That's when I spoke up. John's company has grown quite a bit, and he has a legal counsel who are dead serious. Realizing he couldn't stand up to John, Elliot turned around to leave. I called out to him as he looked back expectantly. This meeting must be fate. I'm going to claim alimony for your infidelity.
What? You can't do that now. What are you talking about?
It's only been 3 years since the affair was discovered. Look forward to the legal notice.
Damn it!
He cursed and fled the scene. Afterwards, I asked John's company lawyer to claim alimony from Elliot. He paid it from his meager savings. Furthermore, not believing me, he went for an infertility test, which confirmed he couldn't have children. He absurdly asked me to divorce John and come back with a child. When John firmly refused, Elliot stopped contacting us. He's now living alone in a shabby apartment, shunned by his family, without savings, leading a lonely, sad life. I feel no sympathy for him. It's a fitting end. As for me, I'm living a peaceful life with John and Pearl. We recently discovered I'm pregnant with our second child and are celebrating as a family. I look forward to a happy life with my beloved husband and children. I can't believe that Angela's husband, Elliot, cheated on her while they were married. I'm very glad that Angela and Elliot had a divorce. And it was funny how Elliot was the one who started with a divorce, but now he wanted to get back together with Angela in the end, after confirming that she's not the one who's infertile. I hope Angela will lead a wonderful married life with John and with their kids from now on. Thanks for watching until the end. Please like our video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video. Just because a pregnant woman like me tend to focus on my own health doesn't mean that I'm spoiling myself. As a pregnant woman, I'm trying to protect the baby growing inside me. So that's why I wouldn't care less what other people say about me behind my back. I also don't care if they try to pick on me, because I'm just trying to protect my precious baby. My baby and I are risking our lives every day just to live each day to the fullest. But my mother-in-law always tries to get in the way and puts my baby and I's lives in danger. I'll never, ever forgive her for this. I'm now in my 9th month of pregnancy. My stomach is getting bigger and bigger each day that it's hard to even look down at my feet. I'm emotionally unstable partly due to the hormonal imbalance of my first pregnancy with the upcoming birth of our baby next month. Knowing what I'm going through, my husband Nick is doing all his best to support me. On his days off, he takes care of all the house chores, including cooking meals, so that I could take a break. Potassium helps ease the swelling, so I made a salad with cucumbers and chicken breast. Nick has been taking very good care of me and my baby. I am extremely grateful. But there's just one person who spoils all these moments. You spoil your wife too much with everything. The person who glared at us, or more precisely at me alone, while she said that was my mother-in-law Lily, who lives with us. The reason we ended up living together was all because of Lily's clever strategy. Lily and her husband had lived in a house together until a few years ago, but after her husband passed away, she could no longer afford to live in that house and decided to move into municipal housing. To apply for it, you needed to win the lottery, and if you couldn't win that, you couldn't live there. The competition must be very high, but to my surprise, Lily happily told Nick that she had won the lottery. So, Nick and I went to Lily's house every weekend to help her pack for the move. Lily rarely moved around and only kept on giving us instructions on what to pack and where to clean. I was forced to not only cook lunch every day, but also to cook dinner for Lily. That vegetable stew was undercooked, so you should learn to cook better, you know. Ignoring all my efforts, Lily would only say negative things about what I do. Thanks to her, I'm always bothered by the issue I have with Lily, even though Nick and I haven't been even married for that long. Nick would try to support me, but when he does, Lily always gets in a bad mood. I'm always the bad guy anyway, right? She sulks just like a child. I felt sorry for Nick, who was always caught in between Lily and I. So every time I would apologize to Lily so she would feel better. So like that, our days of helping Lily had continued. But on the day of the move, a huge amount of her belongings were brought into our house. Huh? Why are they all here? While Nick and I were confused at what was happening, Lily arrived at our house in a taxi. Lily gave instructions to the movers so that they could move in all of her things into the room quickly and efficiently. Nick calls out to her. What is going on? Well, you can see what's happening, right? I'm moving in. We ended up finding out that Lily didn't even apply for the municipal housing lottery. She had planned to move in with us from the very beginning and had us help her move by telling lies to us. Lily's belongings were being moved into a room that I had planned to use for our child in the future. She didn't like Nick and I's reaction towards her moving in with us, so she started to make these sarcastic comments. I know it would be annoying for you both if I'm here, but do you think an old person like me could live alone at my age now? I can't even sleep because I'm afraid of what would happen. Then, Lily acts really sad as if we would feel sorry for her. It was nothing but a masterful performance. The movers also heard her and it looked like they pitied her. After all, I am disturbing your love nest, right? I wouldn't like it if I had an old person live with me. The way she said this was completely on purpose, and it really disgusted me. Oh, that's not true, so don't say that. Nick was tricked by his own mother's tears. Well then, please take care of me well. Thank you. So this was how Lily had moved in, and this was how we were forced to start living together. The nearest municipal housing was already full, so Nick looked for an apartment for Lily, but she wouldn't budge. I don't want to live there unless the apartment's less than 5 years old. Since my only income is pension, I also can't afford the rent. If you can pay me, then I'll consider it. Lily saying things like that in a selfish way had continued, so she continued to live with us. In the meantime, Lily became more and more involved in our private life, and a year passed since she moved in with us. As Lily's daughter-in-law, I couldn't really complain, and eventually it became normal for Nick that Lily was at our home. Since Lily was always at home, it was difficult for me to find a place where I could relax. Not long after that, I found out that I was pregnant. Both Nick and Lily was very happy about it. Lily, who had always treated me so harshly, supported me a lot for the sake of her unborn grandchild. But when she found out that our baby was a girl, her attitude changed drastically. Why isn't the baby a boy? You really are a useless wife. She began to pick on me again. Even when I was dizzy with anemia or lying down since my stomach hurt, she would wake me up without even caring about my health and forced me to do all the house chores. Nick was the only person who can stand between Lily and I. But lately, he has been very busy at work, working overtime and coming home after 10 p.m. Knowing that he's also physically tired, I didn't want him to have to worry about the issues back at home, so I just tried to bear with the situation. I decided to be patient until the birth of my child. But there was a limit to my patience too. It was way better than not taking any action. That's what I thought to myself. One day, Lily's old friend came to visit. She's coming around our town to attend her relative's wedding. So please make sure to take care of her and entertain her well when she comes. She was coming to our house tomorrow. Lily's abruptness is nothing new, so I wasn't really surprised about it. Tomorrow, I can just get some takeout for them. As for the cleaning, Nick did his best to make the living room sparkling clean. So, we were all ready for Lily's friend to come over. But on the day, it unexpectedly rained heavily. It was a very strong rain, almost like it was hailing, since the rain was pounding on the windows. Lily, who was staring blankly outside, says something outrageous to me again. With this kind of rain, I think my friend is stuck at the bus station, so please go pick her up. What? I regret so much about the fact that I questioned her back. Lily, looking in a bad mood, glared at me and says this. Even a pregnant woman can at least drive a car, right? So just go. How could you? I can't. Not with the weather this bad. Being 9 months in my pregnancy period, my stomach is so big that I feel like it's already reached its limit. It's too cramped and painful to drive, and if I should happen to get into an accident due to this weather, it would be just horrible. As I looked into Lily's eyes, I firmly told her that I was worried about picking her friend up in this weather, and that I wanted to give priority to my baby, and that I wanted to rest. Even though I said that, Lily's attitude didn't change at all. You're just spoiling yourself by making ridiculous excuses. I've always listened to whatever my mother-in-law said, even when I was pregnant. But if I drive in this weather and get into an accident, that would be your fault for being careless. Just hurry up and go. Lily, I really can't. I'm sorry. Are you talking back to your own mother-in-law? I can't believe I have to deal with a useless wife like you. Lily's face turned red, and she was furious. Then she grabbed my arm, mercilessly opened the front door, and threw me out. Stunned by the strong rain beating down on my skin, Lily throws the car keys at my feet. Hurry the hell up and just go! While we're arguing like this, my friend is waiting at the bus station, you know? I pleaded to Lily desperately, thinking for the baby in my stomach. There is a different way for your friend to get here, like by a taxi. Just go! Lily tried to close the door, and I, desperate to stop her, fought with her at the front door. I was completely soaked from the rain. Lily stubbornly refused to let me in, despite the fact that a pregnant woman wasn't allowed to get cold. And at that moment, someone put his hand on the door behind me.
What are you doing? Mom, hurry up and let her in.
Nick had come home early. He had come home on time without doing any overtime due to the bad weather. Nick frowned at the situation. I was finally able to enter the house, and Nick immediately wiped my cold body with a towel. Seeing this, Lily was in a completely bad mood. Why do you always take her side? I am your mother. You're terrible.
You're the one who's terrible, Mom. You're out of your mind letting a pregnant woman out in this heavy rain. What the hell is wrong with you?
Lily was all teary-eyed as Nick raised his voice, which was pretty rare. I didn't do anything wrong. I just told her to pick up my friend with a car. Nick sighed loudly as Lily began to cry in an exaggerated manner. Nick, thinking that talking to Lily won't solve anything, asked me what had happened. I told him everything Lily had done and said to me. Then, Lily, who should have been crying, immediately argued back at what I had explained to Nick. She's lying. She wants to get rid of me and she's just trying to make me look bad. She screamed hysterically and interrupted me to prevent me from speaking any further. Nick tried his best to calm Lily down, but the situation didn't change at all. Instead, it got worse and worse. You are just being brainwashed by her. You used to be a kind and gentle boy who cared for your mother. Just when both Nick and I were completely overwhelmed by Lily's words, the doorbell rang at just the right moment. When we opened the door, Lily's friend, Pauline, was there. Apparently, she had taken a taxi and had arrived safely. Feeling something wrong was going on, Pauline asked me if something had happened. So Lily, took this opportunity to start saying bad things about me while explaining the situation. I'm sorry I made you take a taxi all the way out here. I was going to ask Nick's wife to pick you up, but she wouldn't because she's pregnant. Really, most of the young wives nowadays are too spoiled. Lily says this so that her friend would agree with her, but her response was surprising. You tried to get Nick's pregnant wife to pick me up in the middle of a storm like this? How unbelievable! That's called abuse! Lily's smile stiffened at Pauline's straightforward comment. Instead of defending her own friend, Pauline raises her tone and began to criticize Lily even more. Lily, your arrogant attitude toward those who are weaker than you and your attitude toward those who are superior to you haven't changed at all. In fact, you've gotten worse, Lily. Hearing Pauline criticize her like this, Lily began to get upset. And the reason you went all through the trouble of inviting me to come over this time was just to show off your happy self living with your son and his wife, wasn't it? I can see right through you, you know. That's not true. I knew that a person like you would never be able to live together with Nick's wife happily, but I never thought that you would be that horrible to her. Pauline really didn't hold back and kept on going on. To be honest, I was surprised to see Lily unable to argue back to Pauline at all. She looked at me, Nick, and Pauline awkwardly. Perhaps trying to get out of it somehow, Lily began to point at me and say this. I wouldn't have tried to force her to pick you up if she had been nicer to me. And yet, she's always against me. I have all the right reasons to get angry at her. The only time I have ever went against her was just now. But Lily's attitude, where she was showing off that she was not in the wrong, was making me more and more angry. Above all, I couldn't forgive her for putting my baby in danger, so I finally decided to take action. I recorded every abusive comments you have ever made about me. I quickly put my own phone in front of everyone. I had actually been recording as evidence every time Lily had accused me of being a crappy wife right from the beginning when we first started living together. No matter how much Lily and I had a bad relationship, she was still Nick's only mother. I didn't really want to do anything that would expose the true nature of such an important person. But if she goes this far, I couldn't keep being silent either. I started to play the recording of the exchange that we just had in the rain at a very loud volume. Then gradually, Lily's face turned pale. Pauline sighed as she listened, and it seemed like she knew this had happened. And Nick had an angry look on his face. Mom, this is too much. How could you do this to my precious wife? Nick seemed to be seriously offended, and his voice got really low, filled with anger. The evidence of Lily bullying me got exposed, and Lily flopped down on the spot without making any lame excuses like she would before. After checking on Lily, Pauline quickly got into the taxi which was waiting by the front door. I rushed over to her and thanked her. Thank you very much for what you said back there. Oh, it's okay. I also feel much better now that I've gotten rid of the grudge I had towards her for a very long time. She's always had a bad personality, you know. But Nick seems to have grown up properly, which is a relief. I hope everything goes well with you and your baby. At the front door, I saw Lily slumped over and Nick looking down at her. Which do you prefer? Living in a nursing home or living alone in an apartment? Nick seemed to have completely given up on Lily after this incident, and was forcing her to make the ultimate choice between the two in order to stop living with her. I am so sorry. I will do everything with my power to make this right. So please don't abandon me. Despite Lily's pleas, Nick didn't budge at all. He made sure for Lily to decide it by tomorrow and went into the back of the room. I didn't speak to Lily either and quickly began to prepare dinner. When it was time for dinner, Lily still didn't move from where she was. Actually, Pauline came to Nick and I's wedding. It was Pauline who came to our table and secretly whispered to me that she cared about me, as I would have a hard time with Lily, and that she told me that I could consult with her if anything happened to me. Remembering what Pauline had said, I called her and asked her to come over and check on how Lily would abuse me. Pauline gladly accepted my request, and that was how she had come over to our house. Lily refuses to live alone or be in a nursing home. So, Nick just decided to move her into a nursing home. Fortunately, Lily had enough money from her husband's inheritance and savings, so there weren't any money issues. And I had cut off ties from Lily. Lily would send me monthly letters of apology, but I never responded back. I never responded because on the letter, her apology was only one sentence, and the rest of the letter was full of complaints about the nursing home where she lived in. I feel as if someone was always watching me. I would have preferred to live alone. I am not that old yet. Even though she complains like this, it's not like I'll do anything about it for her. Nick also refused to receive the letter from Lily, and since then, she had stopped contacting Nick. In no time, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl on the due date. We are now doing our best to raise our child in our home without Lily. This is what happiness as a couple is all about. Every day I exchange smiles with my husband. I hope the three of us can continue to live together in peace.
My mother-in-law uses my credit card and tries to use my inheritance to pay off. As a result,
My name is Helen, and I'm 32 years old. Although it is the beginning of a new year, nothing good has happened at all. Most of our electrical appliances in our house have broken down, and my eldest daughter, Maggie, had to change classes as soon as she entered the 3rd grade. And since she was not in class with all her best friends, she goes to school every day in a very grumpy mood. She often asked for a day off because she was unhappy at school. I try to calm her down and make her go to school every day, but to be honest, it's very difficult to do that every single morning. My younger son, Tim, began playing volleyball during spring at his volleyball club, but he recently sprained his finger. It seems like he had a fracture, and I had to arrive at work late every week to accompany him to the hospital. People at work makes me feel ashamed of myself every day, since they would talk behind my back just because I had kids. My husband, Dan, quit his work 3 months ago because he got mentally depressed due to the horrible power harassment he received by his previous boss. Although he transferred to a new company where it's easier for him to work than before, his income had dropped drastically. Despite these problems which happened to our family, Dan and I are doing the best we can at the moment. Recently, however, something horrible happened to our family. My mother passed away. She had been very healthy until recently, but she had been feeling exhausted for days on end and went to the nearest hospital for a checkup. I accompanied her to the hospital, and at the hospital, the doctor told us the name of the disease that she had, and I really couldn't believe my ears. She had terminal cancer. My mother was surprised as well. When the doctor told me that the disease had progressed to the point where there was nothing they could do, my mind went blank. My mother, who was surprisingly calm, laughed and encouraged me. "Oh, don't worry. Maybe I can get better." My mother's positivity at times like this was one of the best things about her, but at that time, it even looked like she was pretending to be fine. Her condition worsened day by day, unfortunately, and only 1 month after we were informed by the doctor about her disease, she passed away. The pain and loneliness of knowing that someone's life had been snuffed out so easily, and that I could no longer talk to my mother, whom I loved so much, overwhelmed me, and I felt as if there was a huge hole in my heart. And because I had my kids, and because I was just so busy with preparations leading up to the funeral, I couldn't even actually feel the sadness of my mother's death. After everything was over, an unspeakable sadness overtook me, and I sobbed in front of my mother's photo as I had realized that I was saying actually goodbye to my beloved mother. Then right after, something had happened. One day, a month after my mother's funeral, I found a letter from a credit card company in our mailbox, and it was sent to my name. I did indeed have a credit card, but I had never used it since I got married, and it had been hidden in the back of the drawer where I kept my bank book and personal things. Thinking for a moment that it had expired and a new credit card had arrived, I opened the letter. Then, when I opened the letter, I found a detailed statement of the credit card which states that I had used the credit card when I had absolutely no recollection of ever using it. The total amount exceeded $10,000. Even though I looked at the details of the statement over and over, I really had no idea what they all were. I thought my credit card information had been hacked, so in panic, I called my credit card company. I explained the situation and asked them to stop the card. Then, when Dan came home from work, I apologized to him and explained the situation. My credit card information might have been stolen. About $10,000 were used with my credit card.
Huh? You're joking, right?
Dan couldn't believe what he was hearing. I apologized to him repeatedly. Immediately after that, I searched for the credit card I had put away in the back of the drawer, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I even came up with a theory that maybe a thief had stolen it, since I never took out the credit card after I put it in the drawer the last time.
This all happened because you had a credit card that you never even used.
I couldn't say anything back to Dan, who was half angry and half fed up of the situation, as he had a point, and all I could do was to keep apologizing. $10,000 is a very large sum of money for us family. Since it was impossible to pay it all in one lump sum, we finally decided that we would pay it back in installments, and for the rest of the day, I was just depressed. That day, after the kids had gone to bed, when I was reviewing the family account book besides Dan, who was looking over at the credit card statement, Dan looked like he realized something. What happened? When I asked, Dan pointed to one particular item on the statement that made me dizzy just by looking at it.
It was the name of a hotel where my mom said that she was going on a trip with her friends this month, and that's where they were all staying at. And $4,000 are being charged from there.
I didn't even know my mother-in-law, Violet, was traveling until Dan told me just then. But when I stopped the credit card, I remember that the lady on the other end of the phone had told me that it was being used at a certain outlet mall as well. That outlet mall was also located at where Violet had traveled to. And on top of that, Violet had visited us just last month. So, I got more suspicious and came up with a theory. Could it be that Violet has my credit card? Dan thought the same thing and immediately called Violet. At first, Dan was afraid to ask over the phone, but he gradually became irritated and annoyed once he began talking to Violet.
Huh? What the hell were you thinking? This is a crime, you know.
As we expected, Violet took my credit card from the drawer while we weren't looking. She used the card to pay for her friend's hotel fee and spending sprees at the outlet mall. And it seemed like she didn't think what she did was anything wrong. Dan thought that anything he would say over the phone would not get us anywhere, so he decided to visit Violet later on to ask her for more details. Of course, I decided to accompany him. This meant that I couldn't use my paid leaves anymore after that, but I couldn't really care less about it. While the kids were at school, Dan and I drove over to Violet's house. Violet has been living alone since her husband passed away a few years ago. Whenever I see her, she would pick on me. And when I go home for Thanksgivings and New Year's, she would push me around to help her house chores. You've married into our family, so you have to follow the rules of this house. The wife is the last one to eat her meal. While the husband is relaxing, the wife would work in the kitchen. Violet is always monitoring me on what I'm doing, and she points out every little details to me. Can't you be more efficient? This is why I hate mothers like you who work at a company. If you got married, then you should do more for your family. I pity my son and the kids. Violet knows what's going on in our family, but she will never stop criticizing me. When she came to visit me last month, she came unannounced to see if I was doing my house chores properly and if I'm looking after the kids. She stayed for about a week, and even when I went to work, she just only relaxed in the living room. I still remember that she never helped me with any of the house chores and would go back home after relaxing and doing nothing at our house. And I will never forget what Violet said to me when my mother passed away. Your mother will be relieved now. Parents are always in trouble when they have a child who isn't efficient at anything. I was angry at Violet for belittling me and treating my mother's death like that. And so we arrived at Violet's house. Without a single apologetic look on her face, Violet quietly held out my credit card. It's not like you were using it, so it's fine.
That's not the point. The bill is coming to us.
Dan's voice rose at once after hearing what Violet has said. Of course, if someone spends a large sum of money on you, even if that person is your own mother, you tell her off. I was moved by Dan's honest attitude. But Violet doesn't budge at all and says this. Because Helen's mother passed away, you'll receive her inheritance, right? So why don't you just use it to cover the expenses? I'm sure you'll also get the life insurance money, so this amount is nothing compared to it. Violet is trying to make us feel sorry for her, saying that she's living on pension. I revealed my frustration at Violet, who once again took my mother's death lightly. Even though I was trembling with anger, she didn't care at all. Oh yes, this house has been badly damaged by termites recently. The building itself is so old, so I'm thinking of demolishing it. So, I'm going to your place next month. Huh? Violet was not intimidated at all by Dan's low, angry reply. Rather, she became more arrogant than ever. So, that means that I'll be living in your house, and we'll be living together. You have extra room anyway, don't you? I was speechless at Violet's attitude of trying to force us to pay for the money she had used, and even to live with her. Even Dan, who is usually so kind to Violet, is raising his voice at her outlandish comments and actions. If you don't want me to live with you, then give me the money to rebuild this house. Dan sighed quietly at Violet, who treated him with arrogance until the very end.
Helen, let's just go home now.
Huh? I followed Dan, who stood up without saying a word, and left Violet's house immediately. At that moment, Violet yells out to us saying this. Well then, since I'm not going to rebuild it, I'll demolish this place. So, I'll be moving in from next month. Please take care of me well. Violet's voice sounded so triumphant that it made me so angry. But Dan was even angrier than I was.
If talking with my mom is not going to work, I have no choice but to take action.
Witnessing Dan's anger, I realized that this was the beginning of the end for Violet. During the next month before Violet forces herself to move in with us, Dan told me about his plan. The company Dan works for has company housing as a benefit, and if there is an opening there, he planned for us to move there temporarily.
No matter what we say,
Mom will do anything to have it her way. So, if that's the case, then we have to be prepared too. Fortunately, Dan's company housing is close to our kids' school, and we brought enough daily necessities and clothes to live there for a while. I thought the kids would be confused by our sudden move, but they surprisingly got into it and helped us prepare moving out.
I didn't know we had another house.
Maggie looked really excited.
I liked where we were living, but this one is really nice too.
And Tim seemed to be enjoying himself. They used to sleep in their own rooms, but the company house only has one big bedroom. I think the kids were very happy to sleep with us in the same bed. And the room was perfect because it had furniture and appliances. So, we were to live in that company housing for a while. Then, on the day when Violet promised that she would move in, when Dan came home from work, he showed me his phone with a big smile on his face. There, I found Violet's call history one after another. I also showed him the call history as proof that I had also ignored all of her calls. We both couldn't help but laugh. Just in time, Dan received an incoming call from Violet. Okay, well, I guess it's time now for us to pick up the call. Hearing the kids having fun in the bath, my husband put the phone on speaker so that I could hear it, and as he answered the call, Violet's frantic voice spread throughout the room.
Where are you all right now?
Well, it's no doubt that we tell her where we are.
I already asked people to start demolishing the house, so I can't go back there. Please, let me in your house now.
Well, we can't because we don't live there now.
Huh? What the hell do you mean?
She has no right to be like that. So Dan tried to tell Violet off and hang up the phone. Violet then immediately started to panic.
Today's weather is heavy rain with flood warnings, remember? Are you going to just let me stay out here in the weather like that?
You have pension which you've been saving, right? Why don't you just use it to stay at a hotel?
How could you say such a terrible thing? That's not the kind of thing you should say to your own mother.
Well, you used Helen's credit card without her permission. No normal person would ask her to pay what you used with her credit card with her deceased mother's inheritance. When my husband made a good argument, Violet choked up to argue back.
But that's not what this is about. Just let me in the house.
I told you, I can't. If you go into our house without any permission, I'll call the police and accuse you of trespassing.
Now wait a minute. Don't you dare hang up on me.
Ignoring Violet screaming, Dan hung up the phone without any care. After that, there were tons of incoming calls from Violet, but Dan consistently ignored them. Eventually, Violet left a message on the answering machine apologizing for what she had done. Later on another day, Dan requested Violet, who was staying at a hotel, to meet us at a nearby restaurant. Violet apologized for everything, including using my credit card without my permission, thoughtlessly saying that my late mother's inheritance should pay for it and her previous verbal abuse toward me. She apologized with her head down that I thought she might hit her head on the table, and for my part, I felt a little bit better. After Violet's apology in front of Dan and I, she repaid me in cash the $10,000 she had used this time, taken from her savings account. My husband and I were astonished when we saw her remaining savings balance. Soon after Violet's husband passed away, Violet told us that her pension was low and asked us to send money to support her. It was an hour's drive to Violet's house, and our kids were still small, so we couldn't visit her often. So Dan and I discussed and agreed that at least we could support her by giving her some money. And since then, we have been sending a certain amount of money to Violet's savings account every month. Even when Dan changed his jobs and his income dropped, the amount which we kept on giving to support her remained the same.
I will not support you financially at all from now on.
Violet was astonished at her own son's words. From everything that had happened, Dan strongly resented Violet's selfishness, so we had decided to do so, even without seeing her savings account. But to this, Violet turned completely pale and desperately clinged on to Dan about it.
That's not fair. I've been saving for a long time. I don't want to use it.
With that amount of money, you could easily afford to rent an apartment and even move into a nursing care facility. So I beg you, just stay out of our lives.
If we live together, this money could be yours, you know. I can't think of any reason for you all to not live with me in the future.
That's enough. You say that, but have you ever spent a single penny of money on us so far? Maggie's textbooks, Tim's textbooks, they were all bought by Helen's mother. You never even spent money on your own grandchildren. When I was also worried about quitting my job, all you cared about was if I was able to send money to you.
Dan then brushed off Violet's clinging hands and walked away. I heard Violet crying, but I didn't even turn around. After that, as Dan had declared, we stopped sending money to Violet. It's most likely that we won't provide any financial support for Violet in the future. So this means that we had cut off ties with Violet. According to what we heard from Dan's acquaintance, Violet had rented an apartment and started living alone after that. It seems that moving into a nursing care facility wasn't an option for Violet, and she was afraid that her neighbors would find out that she had been cut off from her only son's family as well. The new place she moved into seems to be a very old apartment, and she is supposedly living there quietly. Violet didn't hesitate at all to use my credit card because she just didn't want to touch her own savings. The reason why Dan was so angry with Violet was because he really couldn't believe her attitude towards our kids, Maggie and Tim, and us, and how she refused to support our family financially. Dan said that he found it extremely shameful that Violet was selfish enough to save money only for her so that she would have a nice lifestyle for herself when she got old. I feel like Violet will probably hardly use her savings. I'm actually nervous that with all the money in her savings account, she might get scammed someday. Even if she does get scammed, we definitely wouldn't help her in any way. After making sure that Violet moved into an apartment, we will move out of the company housing and move back into our house confidently.
As soon as my father's company went bankrupt, my mother-in-law tries to break us apart. But the truth behind the bankruptcy is,
my mother-in-law and my mother went to elementary, middle, and high school together. They knew each other, but they weren't close friends, so they rarely spoke to each other. That's what I heard. My now husband, Logan, proposed to me last year. But shortly after that, my father's company went bankrupt. My mother-in-law hated my mother, but she still reluctantly allowed the marriage because my father was the president of the company. So as soon as she found out that my father's company went bankrupt, she came to my workplace and called me out while I was at work to say, "Marriage with a family with no money is a shame. Break up with my son, quickly." As usual, she treated my family as if we were poor. "You don't know anything. You'll regret it," I thought it to myself. Let me tell you a story about whose life suddenly turned into a nightmare. I am Naomi, 28 years old. I work as a pharmacist at a dispensary near my parents' house. I spent 6 years at my university pharmacy school. I came back to my hometown to become a licensed pharmacist. My husband was one of my classmates in high school. After graduating from high school, like most of us do, we went our separate ways. when I came back to my hometown during my vacation. He had just returned from college as well, and we met again. We started dating. I had heard that my mother-in-law went to school with my mother, but I never had the chance to meet her. So I didn't think anything of it, but she wasn't the same. Few years after we started dating, he and I promised to spend the holidays together in our hometown. All of our good friends from high school were going to join us there. We decided to have a party for the first time in a long time. They were all curious and wanted to hear about me and Logan's relationship too. Logan offered to let us have a party at his parents' house. His parents' house was originally a landowner's house in this area, and it is what you might call a mansion. He used to say, "It's just a big house. It's too cold and I don't like it." But in reality, it was indeed a magnificent house. I was surprised at how spacious the entrance was. The entrance alone is bigger than my room. "Come on, everybody, get up here." When he saw that we had all been so overwhelmed by the size of the room, said so and welcomed us in. And to get to his room, we went down the hallway past several guest rooms, and then we went up the stairs to the second floor. He told me that he was allowed to use the whole second floor. His room was at the far end of the hallway. There was a sofa and a big TV. On the other side, there was a bed and a desk. It was much larger than what you would think of when you hear the word his room. There is no comparison. Logan even ordered catering for us, and we all had a nice chat and enjoyed the party. After a while, I asked to use the bathroom. He followed me because it was downstairs. "Your house is gorgeous and huge. I could get lost." "Yeah, it's huge, but cold and uncomfortable to live in." "Wow, they look expensive too." I peeked into what looked like a big vase on a shelf by the hallway. Then all of a sudden, Don't touch them. Poor people like you shouldn't." I was surprised to hear her loud voice, and it was my mother-in-law. "If a poor person touches it and breaks it, you can't pay for it, can you?" "Well, I didn't break anything." "Mom, she was just looking at it. What's wrong with you?" "There's nothing wrong with me. I'm saying this for the poor girl. She is tall, slender, and beautiful, but she had a wrinkle between her eyebrows and she looks very scary." "What do you mean poor? Naomi is not poor." "So, she is Watson's daughter after all." My mother-in-law said so, with a horrified look on her face. "She looks poor. If she steals anything from our house, we won't approve of it." "What are you talking about? Naomi would never do such a thing." With that, my mother-in-law went back down the hall. It seemed that my mother-in-law did not like my mother. After the party, I went back to my parents' house and asked my mother about my mother-in-law. She told me a story that I never expected to hear. My grandmother, my mother's father, had failed in business before she was enough to go to school. He had come here from New York to escape with his family after his business failed. Grandpa worked as a delivery man for a liquor store. He managed to support the family by working there for years. So as a child, when my mother wore shoes, she couldn't even ask her parents to buy her a new pair. But Grandpa worked hard and was able to run his own liquor store. That was Watson's Liquor, which my father has now taken over. My mother-in-law was the one who bullied my mother for her poverty. It smells bad in here, doesn't it? Oh, that's the smell of poverty. Stay away from me. I'll get sick. She used to say things like that to my mother. My mother-in-law was the daughter of a rich family. She was always surrounded by a lot of people, but they were just bribed by her money. My mother-in-law and her cronies always would pick on my mother, ignore her, and harass her. My mother-in-law had a crush on this boy who was in their class. She always gave him toys and sweets. One day, however, my mother-in-law was picking on my mother, as she always was. Where did you get that sweater? It's so tacky. Then the boy found out my mother-in-law teasing my mother. Hey, stop it. Don't you do such a thing. You're always picking on her and isolating her from the other guys. You were such a jerk. Everyone said so. No, I don't. Let's get out of here. Come on, follow me. Oh, okay. After that, she stopped being mean to my mother. My mother-in-law went to school with my mother all through elementary, middle, and high school. She never spoke to my mother. I see. It's a long-standing grudge from elementary school. After a while, Logan and I continued our relationship, and he proposed to me on my birthday last year. Every time I saw my mother-in-law, she kept calling me a poor girl or a thieving cat. I try not to pay much attention to it. After graduating from a university, he returned to his hometown and joined a major company. However, he had studied business management at a university and had always wanted to start his own business. While working for a company, he has been steadily building a network of his contacts for his future. Of course, I could think of no one else to marry but him. However, right after we registered our marriage, my father's company, Watson's Liquor, went bankrupt. My mother-in-law hated my mother, but she still reluctantly allowed the marriage because my father was the president of the company. So as soon as she found out that my father's company went bankrupt, she came to my workplace and called me out while I was at work to say, "Marriage with a family with no money is a sham. Break up with my son. Quickly." As usual, she treated my family as if we were poor. You don't know anything. You regret it, I thought to myself. The truth is, my father's company went bankrupt, but it was because my father wanted to start a new business that could make the local community more prosperous. The company was originally a grocery store that mainly sold alcoholic beverages. But he wanted to create a company that would focus more on local products and also spread them to other countries. So even though the company went bankrupt, it did not mean that things were not going well. It would have been difficult to have a proper meeting for the two families together, because my mother-in-law would have interfered at every turn. So we decided to skip the wedding ceremony and registered our marriage for the time being. My family liked Logan, and we often gathered to have dinner together. On my mother's birthday, I booked a best-known Italian restaurant in the area. This was actually a plan that Logan and I came up with together. My mother and his mother would never see each other. The plan was to coincidentally meet the two. Yes, Logan was going to bring his mother to this restaurant. My mother and I were seated by the window, which was the largest table in the restaurant. My father used to frequent this restaurant, and so did my mother and I, and the staff knows as well. Logan and my mother-in-law were seated next to us at the very back by the kitchen. They arrived just as we are finishing our appetizers. Naomi? Oh, hi, Mother. It's been a while.
Oh, hi, Logan. Are you having dinner with your mother too?
That's right. We heard this place is the best.
My mother-in-law remained silent, but when they sat down,
I've just remembered I have something to do. So just eat and get out of here. Please order the dishes that can be served the soonest.
and as it was, I was having trouble making a connection to talk with her. Naomi, is this kind of a plan? Isn't it? What should I do? My mother asked me in a whisper. My mother-in-law hates us and still treats us like a poor people. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to talk and get to know each other. I told my mom the reason in a whisper. She said, "Okay, let me handle it," and walked over to Logan and my mother-in-law's table. We certainly hadn't been close since we were kids, but our children trust each other very much, and they made a great couple. I don't think it's right for us, as mothers, to get in their way by dwelling on things that happened a long time ago. Why don't we try to be friends again?
Dwell on a past? What are you talking about? I'm selective about who I talk to or make friends with. My friends are all decent people, including the wife of the president of the great Johns Hopkins Hospital and the wife of a lawyer. I don't want poor people like you.
It was a long time ago that I was poor. Now I can live a normal life.
I'm saying I don't feel the need to deal with people who are normal.
My mother did her best. It didn't change my mother-in-law's mind or her attitude. As for the wife
Of the director of Johns Hopkins Hospital, my mother-in-law bragged about,
Dr. Hopkins had invested in my father's new company. My father and Dr. Hopkins were classmates at the top school around here. They were best friends and still go out for drinks together. My father's other best friend, Mr. Moore, is also a friend at the same school. He is a president of a big electronics franchise store. The three of them often go golfing together. Moreover, Logan's father works for Mr. Moore's company. My mother-in-law does not know this. One day, my mother-in-law and her friends had lunch at the hotel. My mother joined them for the first time. Dr. Hopkins' wife introduced my mother to everyone. This is Mrs. Watson, the wife of my husband's best friend. I hope you all get along well with her. My mother told me later that my mother-in-law was very surprised. My mother told my father that my mother-in-law didn't think well of our marriage and was disturbing. He contacted his best friend, Dr. Hopkins, and asked his wife to cooperate with him. My mother-in-law, as expected, could not raise any objections right then and there. She was so proud of her friend, the wife of the president of the great Johns Hopkins Hospital. Of all people, to introduce her classmates whom she hated for a long time. My mother-in-law kept quiet that day. But there was no way she was just going to keep her mouth shut. She called each of the wives individually and gave them expensive gifts. She told them about my mother's past and made them hate her and exclude her from their circle of friends. And she gave the same expensive gifts to Mrs. Hopkins and said, "I don't think it's good to get involved with such poor person." I had no idea you were this vile. I heard that you gave everyone gifts and spoke ill of Mrs. Watson.
that you were asking them to exclude her from the group. No, I was just trying to make sure you weren't fooled. I was just trying to let you know the truth. We can no longer treat you as our friend. I will not be calling on you again. I'm sorry, but I have to say goodbye. My mother-in-law lost a friend she was proud of. One day, Mr. Moore invited Logan's father to play golf with him. He also invited his best friends, my father and Dr. Hopkins. And the four of them went golfing together, and they all have a great time like high school students. Well, this was really fun. I'd love it if you would invite me again. Of course we will. Right, Doug? Sure. And I have a great time as well. I'm thinking of going overseas to play golf next time. Wanna come? Yes, I'd love to join you. Logan's father went home that day in a very good mood. He is usually a quiet person, but that day he couldn't help but tell his wife how happy he was. They were such nice, cool people, and it was so much fun. Huh? So what? I don't have time to listen to your happy stories. All she could think about was how she was going to lose her friend and the huge debt she had spent on gifts. You are always in a bad mood, and you are a disgusting woman. You make me feel bad when I'm with you. I've reached the end of my rope, and I'm getting a divorce. Divorce? What nonsense! You were divorcing me? Don't be silly. You are alone. You have no one. What would you do without me? I've got friends. Stop disrespecting me. I've had enough. You serious? No way! And my mother-in-law got divorced and kicked out of the house. Her rich friends, of whom she was so proud, cut her off. All that was left were the debts she spent on gifts. She had secretly borrowed the money on her own. Logan and I continued to enjoy our newlywed life as husband and wife. We bought a house together. He told me that he wanted a house that was moderately spacious and warm. Now my parents and Logan's father are visiting us in our new house. This house will surely be a place where the family will make many memories together.
My mother-in-law hates me and even refuses to call me by name. Finally, my father-in-law became furious, and as a result,
Hey, hold that side of the table. Hey, watch out for the spilled soup. Haha.
A few minutes ago, I was bullied as usual by my mean mother-in-law. And now she's standing there with a pale face. What in the world is going on in front of my eyes? My name is Natalie, 31-year-old, and I am an office worker. I met my husband Dylan at my company where I work. My husband was my supervisor, and at first, I felt that he was a very strict senior employee. But as we worked together, I soon realized that he was a very straightforward person about his work. I respected him, but I became interested in him romantically. One day, I confessed my feelings to him. I was prepared to have myself crushed, but he said he liked me too. The moment Dylan gave his answer, I fell off my knees and cried. After several years of dating, he proposed to me on Christmas Day. I would like to say everything is going well, but in my newly married and happy mood, I was soon destroyed by my mother-in-law. My husband has a sister named Brooke, and I liked her from the beginning. Until we got married, he lived with his parents all his life. Until he moved in with me, he could hardly do any housework. My mother-in-law seems to be a very protective person. If my husband or sister-in-law tried to do anything, she would say, "Sit down and let me take care of it." She would take any tasks from away from them. After we moved in together, I trained my husband to do all the housework. And he quickly showed his high specs in housework. On weekends, he sometimes cooks a meal for me. It's quite delicious. How many times have I thought to myself, how jealous. My husband started to get into cooking. And recently got into making Indian curry from scratch. To be honest, I was a bit taken aback. "I've made too much curry. I'm going to share it with my parents." He left with a smile on his face, but came back a few hours later with a troubled look on his face. "Natalie, what do you think of my mother?" He looked at me with a serious face. I looked away and answered with a forced smile. But I guess my face said it all. He sighed. "I thought so. Well, actually..." When he arrived at his parents' house, his mother-in-law seemed happy to see him, that his mother-in-law immediately started humming and preparing tea. But when my husband told her he was leaving the curry and going home soon, she got quite grumpy. I wonder if that person making fun of me for making me homemade curry, and to make Dylan bring it here when he's tired from work. That girl has got a lot of nerve. By the way, that girl means me. I don't know why, but my mother-in-law stubbornly refuses to call me by my name. She calls me that girl, you, hey, and so on. It annoys me every time, but I try not to show it to my face. And when she found out I made the curry, she got in a good mood and started praising me. Well, that was disgusting. According to my husband, while patting his head, she said, "You did great, honey." The mother-in-law spoke to him as if she were worried about a small child, saying he wasn't hurt. My husband felt sick with that and left quickly. I've always wondered, but is my mother overprotective? Brooke's the same age as Natalie, but I wonder if she can do any housework. That's not good for her, right? I love you, Dylan. But isn't it a little too late to realize it now? I almost couldn't contain my laughter. But seriously, from the first time I met my mother-in-law, I knew she didn't like me. Or rather, I knew she hated me. At first, she smiled at me, but the moment I said my name, she suddenly became very curt. I was even a little excited, thinking to myself, whoa, there is such a person. Since my mother-in-law loved her family of 4, the thought of her son's wife destroying the family dynamics was more than a little frustrating. She's full of love for her family, but sadly, my husband's sister is also annoyed with her mother. I feel a little sympathy for my mother-in-law. Brooke, my sister-in-law, has a cheerful personality. Mom, I don't know what you're upset about, but Dylan and I are already adults. Of course we are going to marry someone or two. Give it up already. Hold on, sweet Brooke. There's only one person you can marry. It didn't bother me that my mother-in-law gave me the cold shoulder, because Brooke always made me laugh somehow. It was the same with my father-in-law. I'm sorry, Natalie. My wife can't let go of her children forever. Thank you for choosing Dylan. Come on, honey. You can't be upset forever. My father-in-law patted my mother-in-law on the shoulder, and she sniffed. Whenever I visit my parents-in-law's house, she's always sulking like this. Come on, what are you, the Grinch? I was again trying not to crack up with Brooke's comment. My husband had never seen his mother like this before. He thought my mother-in-law and I were simply compatible. I don't think it was too bad when I introduced my girlfriend to her in high school. I was somewhat annoyed that my husband was talking about his ex-girlfriend out of nowhere. But it all came crashing down after one incident. It was a year after we got married. My relationship with my mother-in-law remained the same, and I got pregnant. My husband was very happy, and although we were not yet in a stable period, we went to my parents-in-law's house together to report the news. I'm so happy for you. Take care of yourself, Natalie. Yes, I'm an auntie now. Natalie, if you need anything, you let me know, okay? My father-in-law and sister-in-law were concerned about my body during my pregnancy. I was very grateful to hear their kind words. However, my mother-in-law stared at my belly and said something outrageous. I wonder if this baby is really Dylan's. I froze at that unbelievable words. Of course it was my husband's child. My mother-in-law had always been cold to me and sometimes ignored me. But I got by. From the beginning, all my family members expect my mother-in-law have been kind to me. But now, I don't know what to do anymore. What is this person? I'm done. To begin with, I've had a little mental breakdown because of the pregnancy, so I unexpectedly burst into tears. My mother-in-law saw me like that and said, "Oh my gosh, you act like that I made you cry. I guess I was right about the baby. Because you didn't say anything." Is she nuts? What is this she talking about? Mom, are you serious? Of course it's my child. How can you say such a terrible thing? Why are you so cold to Natalie? You're sick. Raging husband made my mother-in-law cringe. Yeah, Dylan's right. You're sick, Mom. Brooke, my sister-in-law, looks at my mother-in-law as if she were looking at a piece of filth. My father-in-law is also quietly staring at my mother-in-law. It seemed like she didn't expect them to be so antagonistic. Hey, you guys, I was just kidding, you know? Right, Natalie? Tell them I was just kidding. It was the first time she called me a name, and at the worst possible moment. And I am the victim here. What am I supposed to say? You want me to say what's on my mind? That's easy. You are crazy. This is disgusting. Can't you tell the difference between what you are allowed to say and what you are not allowed to say? I've had enough. I'm never coming back here. And I ran out of the house just like that. My husband and I would often fight, but I always won. He says I'm pretty scary when I lose my temper. He says he doesn't think he can win because of the way I look at him. Sometimes he would get as small as a trembling chihuahua. He would come right after me and apologize for the whole ride home. I'm never going back to your parents' house again. I muttered quietly to myself, and I stared at the scenery outside. Of course, I'm not going there either. I feel sorry for my dad, but I'm willing to cut it off. My husband chose me over his family, and that alone was reassuring. My mother-in-law's words made me angry, even as I remembered them. But I didn't want to think about it because it would hurt the baby. My husband is on board with that. So for now, all I think about is the baby. The next few months were as peaceful as if the incident had never happened. I told my parents about the pregnancy. They sent me pictures every day, saying that they bought this and that, even though the baby wasn't born yet. My mother-in-law frequently contacted my husband from that day onward. Every time he received a message, he reported it to me. I read the content of the message once, but I didn't think she was sorry for what she had done. I still don't understand why she hates me so much. Brooke often contacted me as well. Apparently, she hardly spoke to her mother since then. My father-in-law seems to be the same way, and my mother-in-law seems to be living in a very tight corner. My dad and I have asked Mom why she is so cold to you, but she refuses to talk about it. Natalie, you've never really met her, have you? Brooke asked me. But I was sure I had never met my mother-in-law before. I've never felt so much dislike from a person in my life. Thank you, Brooke. When the baby is born, please come to see. Sure, Brooke said happily. A few months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Her name is Lily, and I wanted her to grow up to be someone who makes everyone smile just by being around her. When I returned home, my parents, who had been very strict with me growing up, would hold Lily in their arms with an overexcited looks on their faces. Is a grandchild really so special? I asked them. I have an older sister and she already had children before me. It's not even their first grandchild. But my parents love Lily so much that they fight over who gets to hold her. Of course! Look, Lily has your eyes, Natalie. It looks like only yesterday when you and your sister were little. My mother holds Lily as if she misses those days. I wonder if my mother-in-law feels the same way. Of course, I had my reasons. A few days ago, my mother-in-law called me. At first, the phone rang, but I was in no mood to talk. After a few rings, I received a long message that expressed her deepest apologies and regrets. It was painful to think that my son had been taken from me. Raising Dylan had been all I had ever known. She said stuff like that. Both my husband and Brooke are adults now. But I felt that to parents, children will always be children. Now that I am a parent myself, I think I understand my mother-in-law's feelings a little better. Still, I can say such heartless words to the person my daughter chooses in the future. But my mother-in-law seems to be deeply sorry. So I wonder if I can forgive her now. When I talked to my husband about it, he said, "Are you sure? Isn't that too much for you? It's okay if you don't want to see her. She's a bitch." Just seeing the look on my husband's face, who was deeply concerned about me, gave me peace of mind. I was beginning to get used to this new life with Lily. I decided to visit my parents-in-law's house. It was the first time since the day of the pregnancy announcement. I was nervous, as well as my husband, to visit my parents-in-law's house for the first time in a few months. When I entered my in-laws' house, 3 of them were waiting for us. "Lily, it's been a while. Haven't you grown up a little?" My father-in-law and sister-in-law had come to visit me while I was in the hospital. It wasn't the first time they would seen Lily. They looked excited when they saw Lily, who had grown up a little. The person in question was standing behind them. She's Lily. She looks like Dylan, does she? Everyone there was relieved when the mother-in-law spoke up. Hey, can't you help me prepare a meal? To my surprise, my mother-in-law asked me. This made me a little happy. My mother-in-law was trying her best to get along with me in her own way. That's what I thought. What? I'll help you, Mom. Natalie, don't bother. Just relax. Brooke was concerned about me and my postpartum body. I'll be fine, Brooke. Thank you. Mother, I'll help you. I replied with a big smile. When I entered the kitchen, the food was already there. I only needed to serve the food. I'll take this to the living room. As I was serving the food, I noticed something strange. There was only enough dishes for 4 people, and there were 5 of us. I'm sorry, but I think we are missing one. I tried to find a missing piece, but I couldn't find it anywhere. My mother-in-law just looked at me quietly, and then she suddenly burst out laughing. There's nothing left. I haven't cooked for you since the beginning. She looked at me with a nasty look on her face and snickered. It seemed that my mother-in-law has no intention of getting along with me. I didn't think she would do something so stupid. We are a family of 4. You are not family. And I hate your name anyway. That last part stuck with me, but I felt stupid even listening to her. You should eat this here. And with that, she threw me a box of Instant Pot mac and cheese. I couldn't stop laughing and said to her, You're really sick. I don't know what's wrong with you, but I hate you too. My mother-in-law's face scrunched up at my words, and she went into the dining room. Natalie, she's not feeling well. She's going to rest in the kitchen for a while. She doesn't seem to have much of an appetite. What a lie. I'll tell my husband about it later. Well, it seems like I have just wasted my time today. I sat in a chair and stared at the ceiling in a daze. Hey! 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 I heard my mother-in-law's impatient voice. Hey, hold that side of the table. Hey! Hey! Watch out for spilled soup. Footsteps came towards me. Natalie, you okay? Did she do something to you again? Natalie, we're going to eat here with you. Mom, you can eat alone over there. My husband and sister-in-law glared at my mother-in-law coldly as they approached me. Hey, hey, let me in too. It's really tight in here. My father-in-law said with a laugh. I picked up Lily in my husband's arms. I was so happy that I cried. Hey guys, look! My dinner is this mac and cheese. I laughed and put the box of mac and cheese in the kitchen table. Seeing this, they looked at my mother-in-law with shocked looks on their faces. Really? What do you want? You should be ashamed of yourself. I don't want this kind of wife. My father-in-law yelled at my mother-in-law. Why do you all choose her instead of me? My mother-in-law's face, which had been pale, now turned in a flash. and she started to cry like a child. Frankly, we were all a little taken aback like that. Lily had been sleeping, but she woke up at the sound of my mother-in-law's loud voice. In the chaos of this room, my mother-in-law stared at me while crying. "It's your fault. Your name. It's your name." What the? I didn't understand a word she was saying. I glanced at my husband, but he looked the same. His eyes were saying, "What the heck is she talking about too?" But my father-in-law was different. "No way. I told you over and over again that it was not." He looked at my mother-in-law with a look of disgust on his face. "You loved her, didn't you?" What in the world am I being shown? I could only watch the fight between my mother-in-law and father-in-law with a blank expression on my face. My mother-in-law was crying so hard that I glanced at my father-in-law. After a sigh of relief, with an embarrassed look on his face, my father-in-law began to speak quietly. "Well, you know." According to my father-in-law's story, his mother, in other words, her mother-in-law, was very strict with my mother-in-law. Her name was Natalie. So, in other words, my mother-in-law put me in the category of people she didn't like just because of my name. Screw you. At this point, I was already about to lose my temper. "Yeah, and then there's that." Awkwardly, my father-in-law continues the story. Apparently, my father-in-law and mother-in-law were classmates in college. And there was this girl who was fighting with my mother-in-law over my father-in-law at that time. They were pretty bickering. Even though it's been a few decades since they graduated, whenever they see each other at reunions, my mother-in-law still seemed to be wary of that woman. Even though the woman is married to another man and has grandchildren. Apparently, her name is also Natalie. Staring at my mother-in-law screaming, and my father-in-law calms her down. I felt like an idiot and left the house. I never thought I'd have to listen to my parents' love story at my age. Natalie, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. My husband said helplessly in the car on the way home. Yeah, right. It was something. I answered him laughing. Later, I got a call from my father-in-law. My mother-in-law didn't listen to him very well, so he finally showed her divorce papers. Of course, my mother-in-law cried and begged him not to leave her. My sister-in-law, who was watching their quarrel, said to her, "I think it's not good for you to stay at home all the time. Mom, you're still in your 50s. Why don't you go out and explore a bit? A local supermarket was looking for employees." My father-in-law seemed to agree with her words, and my mother-in-law started working. She seemed to be scolded very strongly by a veteran employee. She always says she wants to quit, but she's doing her best. She seems to have started to reflect on how she treated me. I started receiving messages from her occasionally. By the way, I'm ignoring all the messages from my mother-in-law for now. Of course, I don't intend to see her for a while. For some incomprehensible reason, I am not going to forgive her for the time being. My husband is appalled by her behavior and has recently begun to seriously consider cutting her off. Am I a bad person? Lily, my daughter, is growing up without any serious illness. Her first birthday is coming up soon, and I am about to return to work. I know it's not easy to balance work and raising a family, but I know I can do this with my husband.